Welcome to the 7th edition of the WiSER Wisdom Series, which is an initiative from Mustard here in Abu Dhabi in the UAE. My name is Nicholas Hurd. I'm Head of Fund Management at the Mohammed bin Zayed Species Conservation Fund, which is a foundation also based here in Abu Dhabi, which provides support for species conservation initiatives around the world. Thank you very much for joining us for what I think will be a wonderful discussion, which today is based around World Environment Day, which is celebrated every year in early June and has been since 1972 to raise awareness and encourage action globally for protection of the environment. And this year, World Environment Day is held under the theme Only One Earth, with a focus on the importance of creating transformative changes towards greener and more environmentally friendly lifestyles. I'm delighted today to be joined by Her Excellency Mariam Almheiri, who is the UAE Minister of Climate Change and Environment, and also by Ms. Laila Abdullatif, who is the General Director of Emirates Nature in association with WWF here. Our discussion today will highlight the impact of climate change on environmental protection and also on conservation policies, and hugely importantly, the participation of women in the environment and in protecting our environment, both on perspective of conservation and climate change, locally and further afield. And also we'll be briefly looking at the influence of science and technology in helping us provide a greener planet. So we'll take the format whereby I'll present some questions, but do please, Your Excellency and Leila, Ms. Leila, feel free at any time to jump in, or if you have any additional comments or anything you'd like to say, please do feel free. But if I may, I'll start the discussion with a question to Her Excellency, which really is that humanity faces two separate, parallel and interconnected crises, that of climate change and biodiversity loss. How, in your opinion, do you feel that the impacts of these two related crises touch each other? And how do you think there might be solutions potentially that could address both of these crises within the coming years? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much that I'm here. I'm honored to be here with Leila, a very dear friend of mine. We're working very much in parallel on so many aspects, and your question is so important. You know, you could see in a way that biodiversity loss and climate change are in a way two faces of the same coin, or the two different faces on one coin. You know, the increasing temperatures, the extreme weather brought by climate change is really pushing species to redistribute, habitat degradation, loss of ecosystem services. Subsequently, this also exacerbates climate change. So in a way, it's a vicious circle that's happening here. And when it comes to our part, we are really pushing the border, let's put it that way, and disrupting our biodiversity. Urbanization, pollution, overfishing, deforestation, these are all anthropogenic effects which are pushing the climate change, exacerbating biodiversity loss, and then this vicious circle is happening. More species are now threatened than ever before in human history. And if biodiversity is disrupted long enough, in a way, our planet starts falling apart. Food value chains, climate, weather, economy. In a way, I see biodiversity as a thread that kind of holds the planet together. And with biodiversity loss, of course, it's not just that we're losing species, we're losing some of our best defenses against climate. If we think about our oceans, our forests, our wetlands, for example, these are carbon sinks, and these are ecosystems for so many species. And it's clear that it's actually impossible to address biodiversity without tackling climate change, and then vice versa as well. You cannot tackle climate change without addressing biodiversity either. So again, they are basically the same coin on two different sides, and this is a vicious circle that's happening again and again. And I always like to look back at the nature-based solution, and this is something our late father, His Highness Sheikh Zayed, and also our late President Sheikh Khalifa, both of them big believers in nature-based solutions and saying that nature holds the key to sustainable development. If we look at the picture behind me, for example, this is an area of mangroves in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. And we really take pride and put a lot of efforts in doing a lot on protecting areas. So far, the UAE has 49 protected areas, which covers 15% approximately of our territory. And we're also supporting the 30 by 30 biodiversity target, which is all about protecting 30% of the Earth's terrestrial and marine environments by 2030. So for us, the blue carbon ecosystems are really important. As part of our NDCs, we're now working on a new NDC for the country. We were at a target of 30 million mangroves by 2030, so an additional 30 million. Now we want to raise this to 100 million mangroves by 2030. And this just shows as well the importance that the leadership of the UAE, the government of the UAE puts on conservation efforts. And this is of course the nature-based solutions. We also have really a great track record. Nick, you are from a foundation of where we do a lot of wildlife breeding and reintroduction programs of species such as the hobara bustard, the Arabian leopard, the caracal, the Arabian oryx, and the Arabian tahar. So the UAE puts a lot of efforts into conservation of the of natural ecosystems as well as species conservation.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And as you say, two problems of the two sides of the same coin. And I think thank you also for highlighting a lot of the work which the UAE has done over the last many years towards biodiversity conservation. And as you say, that also supports climate change mitigation moving forwards. Now, this obviously is something that cannot be done in isolation. And so if I may move to you, Ms. Laila Abdullatif, the importance of collaboration and partnership is something which I think we can all agree is crucial towards addressing these crises. I mean, how would you potentially foresee either currently or in the future, how the public and private sectors can work together? And how do you see the non-governmental sector participating and supporting those efforts moving forward?
Thank you, Nicholas. And first of all, I'd also like to say thank you all for having me today. And thank you as well for this opportunity. I'm also honored to be on this panel with Her Excellency Mariam Almheiri, and of course with you, Nicholas, as well. So thank you very much. I think it's an extremely important question. And although a lot of the times the answers seem to be quite obvious for us in the sense that we all do have a role to play in this particular issue, the particular roles that we have as corporate sectors, NGOs, individuals within our community, and the government can also be quite unique. And that's the beauty behind it. Because if you look at a topic like environmental conservation, and as Her Excellency Mariam was mentioning, biodiversity loss and climate change, all part of the same coin, if you will, it's important that we look at the strengths amongst the different sectors of society and identify how we can collaborate effectively and build on one another's strengths. Specifically, with regards to an NGO, we tend to play a very particular role. We try to act as a catalyst to not only highlight those key areas and topics, if you will, that really require that cross-collaboration between the private sector and the government, but also look at piloting some of these projects in the ground. Because when you pilot projects on the ground, you start to see and identify what those particular challenges are. And that way, you have a much stronger idea of how to work cross-sectorally with the different partners on creating those innovative solutions. And these solutions really need to be co-created. And so we tend to play a role where we look at what are the challenges, we identify how can the private sector really come in and work on strong strategic market transformation, but then what sort of policy measures need to be put in place by the government to enable the right landscape for both the private sector and government to work creatively on a solution. But then there also comes a time where the community should have the opportunity to be involved as individuals on the ground, whether that's through incubating ideas or ideating solutions, or even acting as volunteers on the ground as citizen science. Because this is where you have that beautiful space where you can create that transformative impact for conservation. It's our duty as well, being within the environmental sphere as NGOs, as government, and even the corporate sector, to provide those opportunities and platforms for the community to be involved. Now, I wanted to share an example practically of how this works, if I may. And I'll actually share an example that's linked to what Her Excellency Mariam was just talking about. And that's the importance of nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions has become a very big priority, not only locally within the UAE, but also as a global innovative way to tackle both biodiversity loss as well as climate action. And more recently, our NGO has been involved in really exploring the role of public-private partnerships and blended sustainable financing to meet the local and global climate biodiversity goals. And this is through a nature-based solutions project, which we're currently undertaking in both the Emirate of Abu Dhabi and as well as Al Quwain. This is in partnership with our government partners, of course, very much strategically aligned with the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment's long-term goals around environmental conservation in the UAE. And it's funded by the corporate sector. So this is a project that's funded by HSBC, where this nature-based solutions project is focused on climate mitigation through the restoration of mangroves and seagrasses, and the creation of sustainable financing mechanisms to ensure that long-term management of these habitats. And our role as an NGO in this particular case in one of the Emirates is to create those criteria and frameworks and principles, if you will, around sustainable blue economy to work with the government on the wider marine spatial planning assessment, the creation of a management plan, field work, along with really promoting investable funding solutions for nature-based solutions, working with our government partners to really define what is the right, again, policy landscape to attract this foreign investment into the UAE that's linked to impact investment. And then how can we bring the community on board as well to really be involved in accelerators and incubator programs to start to come up with ecotourism models and SME, potential new SMEs in the Emirates of Al Quwain and Abu Dhabi, where they again are very much involved in essentially supporting the country towards that green transition and green recovery by creating those microeconomies within our local communities in the country. So it just shows that in order to really be impactful and have that transformative impact on a topic that's as big and meaty and important as biodiversity and climate action, you really need to have that collaboration across the board. And there are those opportunities now in the UAE for everybody to be involved.
If I may just add, Nick, to what Laila said, the point of partnership is so important here. I mean, yes, we can talk about policies in place and strategies, but I find one of the key elements that are working so effectively and so fast is what Laila said, partnerships. And we're not talking about just partnerships nationally, but also internationally. So taking the knowledge that you have, taking that, sharing that with others, cross-boundary discussions, it's so important because climate change, biodiversity loss is a global issue. And we need all hands on deck, and it is everybody's business because it affects all our lives. So I think the UAE has really shown some great examples of global partnerships. So Aim for Sea was one of these, Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate, again, trying to build climate resilient solutions for food systems. And we've got more as well in the pipeline because of COP27 coming in Egypt and COP28 in the UAE. We're really trying to spearhead partnerships coming from our region in really accelerating our efforts on climate change mitigation, adaptation, and also biodiversity loss as well.
Absolutely. Thank you both for your comments there about the importance of partnership and collaboration. You did both also mention the importance of societies and communities, and also us as individuals. I mean, we're all in this together on an institutional and on an individual level. I mean, and as we move forward and new environmental policies are introduced in the UAE and globally, I mean, I'll pass this question to you, if I may, Your Excellency Mariam. How do you see these policies as we move forward impacting societies on an individual level, on what we can do as people outside of our, let's say, institutional lives?
Yeah, I think it's really important, since we're trying to encourage everybody to live in harmony side by side with nature, with species. It's important that countries adopt, of course, policies and strategies. We're very proud in the UAE. We have a very, very long-standing environmental policy. We have the National Biodiversity Strategy. We have the National Climate Change Plan, which talks all about the mitigation and adaptation efforts. We've worked with the IUCN on identifying invasive species of the UAE. We have the UAE Red List projects. We've done a lot of projects with the HE Emirates Nature, WWF as well, all on trying to get the community on board to realize the value of nature and how beautiful it can be to work together. And Laila actually mentioned something really interesting about ecotourism. I think this is something the UAE has really sort of accelerated in the past few years. And I think COVID accelerated it even more, because we started to look a little more inwards. Since we have to stay here, why don't we start discovering our country even more? There is a tendency to always go out to discover other countries, but during the lockdowns and the restrictions that happened, people started to actually go and explore their own country. And knowing also the UAE is home to 200 different nationalities, we had a lot of people starting to look inwards. So there was kayaking through the mangroves, rock climbing, and we've started to see now ecosystems such as the mountains in Hatta or Ras Al Khaimah actually, sprouting with activities and people going there to hike. And this is so good, because you start realizing how beautiful it can be to go out on a day and be with nature. And this is something we all crave. And when we see with our own eyes what we're actually doing to it, it encourages also the communities as well to say, okay, now we understand why we have these regulations. I mean, we all know that the COVID outbreak was, when you look down the line, something related with biodiversity and climate change. Our species and humans are getting squashed together. Our habitats are coming closer together, and this imposes a lot of risks on us. So we need to make sure that these policies and strategies are in place and are respected, to make sure that society understands that this is a way of arranging and organizing the harmonious living space that we have. Only one Earth. I think that's such an impactful motto, because we are running out of space, to be honest with you. And this is why it's even more important. And it's even more important, again, to listen to other countries and build partnerships and learn from lessons learned as well. This worked out here, or this could be done better. When we look at the small islands, for example, they're really suffering from rising sea levels. And a lot of them were talking to me about creating a wall. Imagine the Maldives or the Seychelles with a wall, but how about we make that wall into a mangrove belt or something? So it's really important that we discuss these things and we help each other, because every country has also a different, we're all at a different where we have different resources, we're all exposed to different risks, and it's so important that we have these discussions and we talk to each other and we exchange ideas and thoughts. And I mean, the UAE, we're very lucky here in the UAE that our leadership does put a lot of effort in helping other countries, whether it's with food or medicine or know-how. And we just want to grow these collaborations even more. And my focus will, going towards COP28 as well, is especially to look at the climate mitigation and adaptation solutions, looking at the power of mangroves, as Laila was saying. When you think of the mangrove being coastal protection, plus carbon sink, plus habitat for so many species, it ticks so many boxes, and we have them here. So this is just one example. And I think it's really important also as a government as well to see the impact of the policies and the strategies that we're doing. Are these having the impact that we actually want from them? I think that's also an important element.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think you brought up a number of very, very important points there, from a government level down to I think the very crucial necessity as well to reinforce the connection that we as humans have with nature, and how we have the opportunity here in the UAE to really take advantage of maybe some natural areas that we had slightly forgotten about over the last years. And so, yes, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's also crucial. Ms. Laila, if I may move on to you, towards maybe something which is also at the heart of the conversation here, which is the role of women in conservation. So both on a, let's say, biodiversity conservation, sort of locally and on a higher level, such as you two both represent. And also within the climate change discussion. How do you see the role of women there evolving in the coming years?
Thank you, Nicholas. Well, I'd like to actually try and attempt to answer this topic first by talking about, the role of women in the wider climate sphere. And in many parts of the world, especially where poverty levels are high, people are heavily dependent on natural resources for their well-being. And in these community members, and in particular their women, experience the devastating impact of biodiversity loss and the impact of climate action, right? In certain countries, women are forced to spend more time traveling greater distances to collect water, food for fuel, animals and plants for food, medicine and clothes. And so the only way to really solve this issue and this multidimensional problem, like biodiversity loss, is to ensure that these stakeholders within the local communities all have a seat at the table. And that includes women. And they have an equal voice, if you will, with regards to decision-making when it comes to, again, the sustainable use of land, water, and other natural resources. Of course, in the UAE, we're seeing as well that a lot of women are moving into those leadership positions, and a lot of women as well are moving into the sphere of climate action and biodiversity conservation, which is amazing to see. And this has been such a quick evolution over the years, but it's really testament to our government and to the opportunities that are provided in this country to really ensure that women do have a voice. But also in the UAE, they do focus a lot on really trying to ensure that our local communities, our rural communities as well, are involved in the discussion around solutions with regards to how they foresee ecotourism within their particular local communities, what are their insights on long-term sustainable farming solutions within their communities. And women have a very key role to play there as well in terms of really ideating and co-creating those solutions. And it's imperative that we start this at a very young age, and we encourage schools and universities across the board to really introduce conservation and sustainability as a key subject in order for us to essentially recruit, but also support the wider community and women as well within the conservation realm to really ensure, again, that their voice is being heard at a very early stage and we're also guiding them and providing them with the opportunities to really be a key decision maker within this particular field. I wanted to actually pick an example which goes beyond the topic, if you will, of women in leadership, but it's more focused on, again, how to really involve local communities in the conservation space across the board. And it might be a foreign example to use in this panel discussion, but it was quite interesting when I was thinking about this question, and I wanted to share it with you. Recently, I traveled to Rwanda, actually, and I traveled to Rwanda because I wanted to explore their all-famous gorilla trekking, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. And it was one of the most unbelievable opportunities I've ever been exposed to in my life. But the reason being is because I got to see how a country like Rwanda, who's gone through a lot of poverty, a lot of conflict as well over the years, has turned around their model to really integrate sustainability within the DNA of the entire community. And it's something I notice a lot of similarities here with what the UAE is trying to do as well, especially with their younger community, in ensuring that they're involved in COP28, for example. They're involved in what does the next 50 years or 100 years look like in the UAE. They're involving the community in these discussions. With Rwanda, it was interesting to see how they've really looked at sustainability and included microeconomies within the rural communities that are tied to sustainability and ecotourism, whereby they've actually gone as far as taking ex-poachers of wildlife and ex-poachers of gorillas and having them change their jobs completely into being those gorilla trekkers and those wildlife rangers that actually take you into the field and allow you to have that experience, because they understand that that is their most valuable asset. And it's tied to an entire model around ecotourism. And the entire community is involved in creating job opportunities and creating interactions as well with tourists, where they really showcase their natural heritage through the lens of ecotourism, because they understand the importance of sustainability for their country, right? And it goes back to what Her Excellency Mariam was mentioning. This topic, it needs to be a wider discussion beyond our own country, but also understanding and sharing best practices of how other countries in the world are tackling this issue around climate change and biodiversity loss. And what are those cross collaborations that can be made within that space? And it's great to see, just to end here, it's great to see that women like Her Excellency Mariam are in that leading role, representing us in the UAE, really engaging at an international front to share and export best practices from the UAE, but likewise also import those beautiful examples of success across the world.
Yeah, Nicholas, I will add on,
Please.
because we're talking about women and children and girls especially. Just looking at Leila and her background picture, that's the late Sheikh Zayed, and he, in the days where he was he was a thinker and he always had a vision. And he said, when he built the first school in the UAE, this was in the 1960s, he said, I want a boys' school, but I also want a girls' school, because the girls are 50% of the community. He understood already at that time, when other leaders around him were kind of questioning this decision, why would you want to put the women into a school? Their role is at home. But he understood how important the women, or to ensure that women were also part of they got taught how to read and write, and they were part of the discussions that were happening at home. And this, for me, is actually incredible, because we are already, in a way, the seeds that he planted then, we're enjoying it now, because we as a country are very advanced when it comes to women empowerment. And the leadership of the UAE have really empowered us. I mean, look at Leila also in her position. We have great examples. Razan Mubarak is now the president of the IUCN. I mean, now we're not just on a national level, but we're going out internationally as well. And this is a huge, and this all comes down to the vision that he had, because he really believed in inclusion and diversity in everything we do. And especially for environmental action, climate change, we need everyone to be there. Unfortunately, when you look at the statistics, you can see that women and children are the ones that have to, are usually the first to bear the brunt of the environmental, economic, and social fallout of any climate disaster. That they are 14 times more likely than men to die during a disaster. So the statistics show how women and girls are sort of the frontliners as well, and how important it is to make sure that they are part of the discussions, because somehow, I don't know, maybe again, I think they're closer to nature. I think they listen more, they have that closer connection to nature, and this really helps in all the actions they take. And don't forget, women's roles as mothers or as the center point in the family is so important, because the women are the ones who are going to be, I mean, Laila and myself, we're both mothers, we have kids, and the way we bring up our kids is so important. What we educate them on climate, what we educate them on lifestyle, on habits, how we educate them on not to throw food away, how we educate them on switching off the lights or not letting the water run. These are just simple things, but they are so, when you sum up this domino effect of family after family after family, and you see as a community how we impact what we do to the environment and how that impacts us back as well, is so important in this. So, I mean, for me, again, we are in a very blessed country that we have women empowerment, but as Laila said, we've also been traveling around the world and we see this is not the case in all places. But it's a big push. I can only see that you have economic development when you put women into leadership positions in any country. You see the economic growth and prosperity and well-being really shoots up. It's such a game changer. Women are game changers. I know, Nicholas, it's a bit unfair here. You've got Laila and me against you, but we need men as much as you need us. And I think it's just so important that women and girls are at the front line at the discussion table, just as their men colleagues are. And also, you know, when you look at the UNFCCC, you've got Patricia Espinosa now heading, and before that it was Christiana Figueres. So we've got a lot of women at leadership positions tackling the climate agenda. Now Her Excellency Razan at the IUCN. So it's really great to see women in these very, very important positions, and I believe through that it brings the world closer together. It forges these partnerships and gets us to work closely together, because time is running out. COP28 will be the first global stock take, and I think with this we're gonna probably not see such good results, but it's so important. The world will be here in the UAE, and it's so important that we have solutions at hand that we can scale up. And I'm a big believer that a lot of these solutions can only happen with strong partnerships and making sure that everyone is included.
Well, thank you very much, Their Excellency. That's a wonderful addition, I think, to what Ms. Laila was also saying. And I think you in some ways have answered much of the next question I was going to ask you, I think, which was how we could potentially, involve more women. And I think you very well mentioned, both of you, that essentially get the children early. And involved and taught the importance of sort of environmental protection and understanding. So you touched as well, Your Excellency, on let's say one of the legacies of Sheikh Zayed being the promotion of women, and you mentioned the school being established in the 60s for girls as well as boys. How do you think that this example could maybe be, if not replicated, at least used elsewhere to really sort of help maybe other countries that are in the situation that the UAE was 50 or so years ago, maybe to help promote the role of women as well for the betterment of our planet in conservation and climate change?
Oh, that's a hard question, Nick. At the end of the day, I think it really comes down to the leadership as well of those countries. You need to, I mean, if they haven't taken that step, they need to take that step, and they're going to see wonders, basically. Yeah, I mean, we are a great example of such a journey, and for sure, every country goes through the ups and downs that happens. There's certain challenges that are then faced, and they have to be solved, and it just goes on and on. But having women as part of the conversations, as part of the overall directions, is so important, because they are 50% of the society. And again, you need to always think of their role in homes. I think this is something that I think I always see a mother is the gravity that pulls the family together. All the habits are usually taken from the mother. So I think the women's role, and so many of us are working, and we're mothers as well. So it's just, I can just say that for any country that hasn't done so yet, they're missing out big time. But I also want to say something else, and I think this is also a huge role that Laila is doing as well with the community engagement. The NGO's role, and this is so important, because they really kind of like make it fun to connect nature with people in the competitions they do, in the gamification applications, and just discovering. It's like when you give a little child a magnifying glass and you say, go and have a look in the garden and see what you find. It's unbelievable what they find. I remember giving this to my niece, and I did this exercise with my niece, and she came up with so many species I never knew even existed in my garden. But again, that was because I never took the time to really look up close and personal, basically. So I think you know, having also the efforts of Emirates Nature, WWF, and, you know, all the trails that they do, and a lot of the beautiful nature ecosystems that we have in the UAE, connecting these or so many nationalities that we have in the UAE that actually maybe just look at the UAE as a desert, but they're actually then exposed to so many beautiful parts of the country, and the different faces of nature. I think that's so important, because then they really appreciate what they see. And I think the shocking part is when you go back there and you see that it's a little bit different, and you think, oh my, I think we need to really think about what we're doing here. Think twice about taking a car. Can you walk? Can you take the bike? Think twice about, okay, you see a discounted, I don't know, take two for one. Do you really need that? Because is it going to end up in the bin? So many habits that we have around, even like from buying clothes. Okay, we usually look at the price. Okay, this is cheap, I'll buy it. But then are you buying a lot of clothes and it's stacking up somewhere, and then you're going to throw it away? Where's the sustainability in the way you buy clothes, the way you buy food, the way you the lifestyle is so important. And that's probably the last message that I can give to those who are listening to us today, that yes, we're talking about biodiversity loss, we're talking about climate change, but us as consumers play such a central role in all these systems, because our behavior reflects what's happening around us. And I'm guilty about it too. I have to always think twice about what transportation I'm going to take, what clothes I'm going to buy, what food I'm going to buy. These things always go in my head. I'm not perfect, and I still have a lot of habits I need to change as well. But it's just realizing this and realizing how connected this is, the habits that we have with the biodiversity loss and with climate, the climate effects, the climate change effects.
Yes, no, thank you, Miriam. I think, as you say, we all have a long way to go. And if I may just briefly pass over to you, Laila, for the last part of the sort of session. Your Excellency, you started off by mentioning the work that Emirates Nature WWF was in terms of reaching out to communities. Laila, how do you think that we can best go about changing the behavior of society and individuals to make, let's say, everyone's daily habits a bit greener?
Well, thank you for that question, Nicholas. And really, it's just building upon what Her Excellency Mariam was talking about. You know, during COVID, I sat down with the team and we had a brainstorming session. We said, what are we doing wrong? What can we do as an organization, environmental organization, to really enable that behavior change across the board? How can we play more of a supportive role within the NGO space as well, not only in the UAE, but how can we even have a bigger impact globally with our WWF association, if you will? And what I got to realize with the team as well is the reason we're all in this field is because something along our lives during our childhood, an experience in nature, is what converted us towards this cause. It was about connecting with the natural environment, having an experience where we understood that, you know, this is, we all have that role to play. And it's so important for each and every one of us to understand as well, what are those solutions that can be put in place in order to really have that transformative impact? Again, 7.8 billion people on the planet means 7.8 billion potential solutions. And what we did within our NGO, or wearing our NGO hat, if you will, was we tried to create a platform that would try to mobilize all sectors of society to really create a civil society movement, if you will, mobilizing people towards environmental conservation and towards climate action. And we realized that by mobilizing people through creating those solutions alongside us, training and development of the corporate sector, of our community members, of individuals, of youth, then it enabled individuals to have the tools to be able to come up with those innovative solutions, but then to be involved in those solutions on the ground. And so all of our conservation projects now, which are in partnership with the government and corporate sector across the different emirates, they all have an element of citizen science and of volunteerism, where if we are working with the local community in Fujairah, for example, in Al Bitna, where we're rebuilding the traditional felaj system, or we're building ecotourism trails with our community members, we actually have a platform called leadersofchange.ae, which enables the wider community to sign up, register, physically come down to the community, mix the cement, build the ecotourism trails, rebuild the felaj system, understand about their traditional farming practices, be a part of those majlis dialogues with tribal leaders, to really then start to have that experience in nature, be comfortable with nature, and then also be comfortable speaking out and having their voice heard in a positive light, where again, they're contributing to that wider piece. And what we've done is we've created a digital platform that allows individuals to create their own personal profiles. So they have their own dashboard where they're able to see how did they actually play a role in this wider impact piece and track that impact over the course of time. So it's taking people along a journey. And I believe it's these sorts of opportunities that have actually been present across internationally, across the world for many years. So you have the Habitat for Humanity model, for example, where people will sign up and register to build orphanages in certain countries around the world. So it's trying to make that connection between environmental causes and environmental solutions and ways in which people can be directly involved in the field, on the ground, and build that connection and experience at the same time. And this is what we've recently launched and what we're hoping we'll get success with over the course of the years with our many partners on the ground, inshallah.
Thank you, Ms. Laila. Thank you very much. That does conclude the formal part of the 7th edition of the Wisdom series from Muster. And I'd like to very much thank you both, Your Excellency Mariam Almheiri and Laila Abdullatif. We can have another 30 seconds each if you have some closing comments that you would like to say. I think we've covered an awful lot of ground, and very, very grateful for that, and with some fabulous ideas and pointers and insights. But if you would like another 30 seconds each, then we can do that as well.
Sure, I will never go without saying we all have a role to play in this. Sit with your families, think of the habits that you have, think of small things you could do to reduce your carbon footprint, help in enhancing biodiversity, and yeah, help save our only one Earth.
Thank you. Very important message there. Thank you.
And I think building on that, think about how you can be a leader within your own network and within your own community, raise awareness about the issues, share some of those solutions, and come up with those really unique, crazy, innovative ideas. There's so many platforms in the UAE where you can share them. And let's implement these solutions together, collectively. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Ms. Laila, and thank you both again for your time today, and for your insights and your thoughts and your very informative comments. And I wish you both the best of luck as you move forward with helping us turn to greener societies and help save the planet from the ravages of climate change and biodiversity loss. So thank you very much again.
Thank you for having us, Nick. Thanks, Laila.
Thank you for having us. Thank you as well, Your Excellency and Nicholas.
Bye.
Thank you both. Bye.
Bye.